It was a night meant for music and good vibes. July 13th, 2024, in the beach town of Salinopolis, Pará, Brazil. The stage at the Solar Hotel was set, the crowd was hyped, and Aris Sasaki, a 35-year-old rock singer/architect, was ready to bring the house down. Yeah, you heard that right. Not only could this guy design a killer building, but he could also rock your socks off. Since 2017, Aris had been touring across Pará, winning hearts and building a hardcore fan base. But on this night, things took a tragic and unexpected turn. Mid-performance, when the crowd was going wild, a soaking wet fan. Why they were dripping, nobody knows. Maybe they took the stay hydrated message too far. Jumped on stage and hugged Aris. Cute, right? Well, not so much. That hug somehow messed with a nearby cable, leading to an electric shock that proved fatal for Aris. Efforts to save him didn't work, and what started as an epic concert turned into a nightmare. Aris was originally from Belém, the capital of Pará, and he had worked hard to make a name for himself in the music scene. The dude even opened for the legendary São Paulo hardcore band CPM 22 in 2021. How cool is that? But music wasn't just a job for Aris, it was his passion, one he shared with his fans, friends, and his wife, Mariana. The two had only been married for 11 months before this tragedy struck. Mariana, a nurse, was always Aris's rock, supporting him every step of the way. In October 2023, Aris posted a beautiful wedding video with the caption, "Eternity awaits us, my love." Now, that message stands as a heartbreaking reminder of their short but sweet time together. After the incident, local police and the civil police of Pará launched an investigation to figure out what exactly happened. While the cause of death was clear, electrocution, the whole wet fan on stage situation raised more questions than answers. Witnesses gave statements, experts examined the scene, and the Solar Hotel issued a statement expressing deep regret and promising to support Aris's family and cooperate fully with the investigation. The Brazilian music community was devastated. Tributes poured in from all corners. Adriano Freitas, a close friend and fellow singer, described Aris as a super charismatic guy with insane talent. So much so that he once played a 12-hour concert because the fans just couldn't get enough of him. Comedian Nato Almeida, who had shared the stage with Aris, remembered him for his kindness, incredible stage presence, and genuinely good heart. Even filmmaker Rafael Masso shared his love for Aris on Instagram, reflecting on their college days and the countless memories they made together. "It's still hard to believe," Masso wrote. "We all loved Aris, and I'm grateful to have been part of his journey." Fans took to social media to express their grief. "Rest in peace, Aris. Gone too soon. Sending love and prayers to his family," one wrote. Another commented, "Your music will live on forever. Peace and love." On a chilly December night in 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, became the site of one of the deadliest industrial disasters the world has ever seen. Without warning, a silent, toxic cloud spread through the air, creeping into homes, choking the streets, and shattering thousands of lives in a matter of hours. This was no natural disaster. It was the result of human negligence, corporate cost-cutting, and ignored safety warnings at the Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant. At the heart of the disaster was methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly poisonous chemical that leaked from the plant after water accidentally entered one of the storage tanks, triggering a runaway chemical reaction that no one was prepared to stop. By the early hours of December 3rd, Bhopal was blanketed in toxic gas. Families awoke in panic, coughing, gasping for breath, their eyes burning as they stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the deadly air. Some never made it out of their homes. Streets filled with people running for their lives, yet there was nowhere to hide from the invisible killer. Thousands perished that night, and in the days, weeks, and years that followed, the death toll climbed to an estimated 15,000 to 20,000. Even worse, over 500,000 people were left injured or permanently disabled, facing lifelong health problems ranging from lung disease and eye damage to neurological disorders and birth defects among future generations. Entire families were shattered, and the city's landscape was forever changed. What makes the Bhopal gas tragedy so haunting is that it was entirely avoidable. Investigations revealed a chilling story of negligence, broken safety systems, ignored warnings, undertrained staff, and a corporate culture that prioritized cost savings over human lives. The plant had become a ticking time bomb, and on that tragic December night it exploded. Experts later found that the warning systems that might have alerted the community were either turned off or non-functional. The company had been warned before about potential hazards but repeatedly failed to take corrective action. It was not just an accident. It was the result of years of overlooked risks. In the aftermath, survivors fought not just to recover, but for justice. Union Carbide's then CEO, Warren Anderson, was charged but never brought to trial in India, shielded by international legal and political obstacles. The company settled out of court, but many survivors and activists saw the compensation as a fraction of what was owed, especially as the factory site remained contaminated for decades, continuing to poison the land and water around Bhopal. Entire communities still live with the environmental and health fallout, and cleanup efforts have been painfully slow, leaving toxic chemicals seeping into groundwater to this day. The Bhopal disaster became a global wake-up call, a grim reminder of what can happen when powerful corporations operate without sufficient oversight and accountability, especially in vulnerable communities. It raised urgent, still relevant points: how we hold multinational companies accountable, how we protect human lives from industrial risks, and how we make sure a tragedy like Bhopal never happens again. The memory of Bhopal stands not only as a symbol of loss, but as a call to action, urging the world to prioritize human safety over profit and to ensure that such a devastating failure is never repeated. It was January 20th, 2021, a bitterly cold day in the Scottish borders. The wind cut across the open land, making the already demanding job of working outdoors even more grueling. But for Robert MacArthur, it was just another day on the job. At 32 years old, Robert was a seasoned, charged-hand linesman with 13 years of experience in the industry. He was respected by his colleagues, known for his reliability, dedication, and no-nonsense approach to work. Outside of his job, he was a passionate football fan, a die-hard Rangers supporter, and a man who took pride in providing for himself and his loved ones. He had operated heavy machinery countless times before, and on this day, he was tasked with moving a mobile elevated work platform, MEWP, near Long Formicus Barrier, working on a new electricity line. The MEWP was a powerful but potentially dangerous machine. It was designed to help workers reach difficult areas, particularly on rough terrain. It required precision, patience, and strict adherence to safety protocols. The terrain in this area was challenging, uneven, steep, and unpredictable. That's why there was an approved access route, one carefully selected to minimize risks. Robert and his colleagues were supposed to follow that designated path. It was the safest way down, but for reasons no one will ever fully understand, Robert made a fateful decision. He chose a shortcut. Maybe he thought it would save time. Maybe he was confident in his abilities. Maybe he had taken the shortcut before and thought he could handle it again. Whatever his reasoning, the choice would prove to be deadly. At first, the descent seemed manageable. The MEWP moved slowly down the steep 22 to 23 degree gradient, its heavy caterpillar tracks gripping the cold earth beneath it. But as Robert maneuvered the machine further down, the ground beneath the tracks became unstable. Then it happened. The MEWP suddenly lost traction. It slid over a raised sheep track, throwing its weight off balance. Robert must have felt the shift instantly, the stomach-churning realization that the machine was no longer under his control. The MEWP started to turn sideways, the metal tracks acting like skis on ice. It was now careening down the slope at a terrifying speed. Robert struggled to regain control, but there was nothing he could do. The MEWP struck a raised, compact tuft of grass, and in an instant, the massive machine tipped over. The weight of the vehicle was too great, and gravity took over. Robert wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The moment the machine toppled, he was violently thrown from the operator's cabin. He hit the frozen ground hard, likely dazed, possibly unconscious. But before he could react, the MUP came crashing down on top of him. The force of the impact was catastrophic. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. The injuries were too severe. Robert MacArthur, a man who had spent years mastering his craft, was gone. In the aftermath, a fatal accident inquiry was conducted at Jedburgh Sheriff Court. Sheriff Peter Patterson led the investigation, piecing together the final moments of Robert's life. The findings were as devastating as they were clear. Robert could have survived. The evidence showed that had he been wearing his seatbelt, he would have likely remained inside the MEWP during the accident. He might have suffered injuries, but he would have had a real chance at survival. Instead, he had been thrown into the machine's deadly path. The second, equally tragic conclusion was that the accident was entirely avoidable. If Robert had followed the designated access route, the one designed to prevent precisely this kind of disaster, he never would have lost control in the first place. The company, Keltbray Rail Limited, had done its part. Their systems were in place. Their safety procedures were clear. But in a moment of haste, Robert had taken a different path. Sheriff Patterson noted that Robert's personality might have played a role. He was a diligent worker, someone who wanted to get the job done efficiently. But sometimes, experience can lead to overconfidence. The "let's just get on with it" attitude that had made him a respected worker may have also led him to take an unnecessary risk. It's a haunting reminder of how even the smallest decisions can have life-altering consequences. One unfastened seatbelt, one shortcut, one moment of misplaced confidence. That was all it took. Robert's story is not just a tragedy, it's a lesson. Safety protocols exist for a reason. They are not suggestions. They are not inconveniences. They are the line between life and death. No matter how experienced someone is, no matter how many times they've done a job before, complacency can be fatal. For Robert MacArthur, a man who had built a career on precision and skill, it was a cruel irony. And for those who knew him, who worked alongside him, and who loved him, it was a loss that will never be forgotten. In April 2016, in a small village in West Java, Indonesia, Irma Boulay took the stage for what would become her final performance. At just 29 years old, she was a mother of 3 and a rising star in the world of dangdut, a popular genre of Indonesian music. Known for her daring stage presence and unique performances, Irma had gained fame for dancing with live snakes. It was this dangerous gimmick that helped her stand out in a competitive music scene. But on this night, the danger became all too real. For this performance, Irma brought out a king cobra named Rianti, one of the deadliest snakes in the world. King cobras are the longest venomous snakes, growing up to 18 feet long, and their venom is powerful enough to kill an elephant. Making things even more dangerous, Rianti had not been defanged, and its mouth wasn't taped shut. This meant the snake's lethal bite was fully active, and the risk Irma took that night was greater than ever before. Despite the obvious danger, Irma had grown used to performing with snakes. She often danced with non-venomous pythons whose mouths were taped shut for safety. But this time she was handling a fully venomous king cobra without any such precautions. Why take such a risk? In the world of dangdut, performers from small towns and modest backgrounds needed every edge they could get to stand out. A typical gig paid around $20, but including a live snake could increase that to $25. A small yet meaningful boost for someone supporting a family. As the show kicked off, the crowd was captivated. Irma sang and danced with Rianti draped around her shoulders, delivering the electrifying performance she was known for. But then, disaster struck. During her second song, Irma accidentally stepped on the snake's tail. Rianti reacted instantly, striking her on the thigh with its venomous fangs. The audience gasped as Irma flinched from the sudden bite, the pain evident on her face. A snake handler rushed onto the stage, removed Rianti, and offered Irma an antidote for the venom. But Irma, ever the professional, refused the antidote and insisted on finishing her set. Despite the excruciating pain and the venom coursing through her body, she kept singing for another 45 minutes. At first, she seemed to hold it together, but the symptoms soon became impossible to ignore. She began vomiting and convulsing, the neurotoxins attacking her nervous system, yet she kept pushing forward. As the performance went on, her condition worsened. Her movements became unsteady, her body seizing up as the venom spread. Finally, after nearly an hour of battling through the agony, she collapsed on stage. The music stopped. The crowd fell silent. Crew members and the snake handler rushed to her side, trying desperately to save her. They administered first aid and transported her to the nearest hospital, but it was too late. By the time they arrived, the venom had taken its toll. Irma was pronounced dead shortly after. News of her tragic death spread quickly, shocking the local community and making headlines across Indonesia and beyond. The story grew even more heartbreaking when Irma's mother, Enkum, revealed that her daughter might not have known the snake was venomous. According to Enkum, Irma believed the snake's mouth would be taped shut, like the others she had performed with before. This revelation added an extra layer of tragedy to an already devastating story. Speculation about why Irma performed with snakes followed. Some believed it wasn't just for show, it might have been for protection. Dangdut performances often attracted rowdy crowds, and female singers sometimes faced harassment from audience members. Indonesian journalist Maid Supriyatma suggested that Irma may have used the snakes to prevent unwanted advances. In a cruel twist of fate, the very thing she used for safety ultimately led to her untimely death. Irma Bule's final performance became a chilling reminder of the extreme risks some artists take for their craft and the dangers they face just trying to make a living. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 is one of the most haunting and pivotal tragedies in American labor history, a moment that forced the nation to confront the brutal realities faced by industrial workers. On March 25, 1911, in the heart of Manhattan's Greenwich Village, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was bustling with about 500 workers, mostly young immigrant women, many of them just 16-year-old teenagers, some as young as 14. They were crammed into crowded workrooms, stitching away at shirtwaists, the fashionable blouses of the day, under grueling and exhausting conditions. Long hours, low pay, little ventilation, and barely any safety measures were the daily reality for these workers who were simply trying to earn enough to survive. That afternoon, disaster struck in the most devastating way. A small fire, likely caused by a discarded match or cigarette, ignited a pile of fabric scraps on the 8th floor. Flammable materials like wooden tables, paper patterns, and fabric piled high, the fire spread with terrifying speed. Workers panicked as thick black smoke filled the air. They tried to reach the exits, but they were met with an unimaginable horror. The doors were locked. The owners, Isaac Harris and Max Blanc, had kept the doors chained shut to prevent workers from sneaking out for breaks or stealing materials, a sadly common and dangerous practice in sweatshops at the time. As the flames roared and the heat became unbearable, many workers found themselves with no way out. The fire escapes were either too narrow, poorly constructed, or already collapsing under the weight of desperate workers trying to flee. Some tried to cram into the building's two small elevators, while others rushed to the stairwells only to be overtaken by smoke and fire. Then came the most heartbreaking and unforgettable scene. As crowds gathered helplessly in the streets below, dozens of young women appeared at the windows, realizing there was no escape. One by one, they began to jump, leaping from the 9th floor in a desperate attempt to avoid the flames. They fell to their deaths right before the eyes of horrified onlookers who could do nothing but watch. By the time the fire was extinguished, 146 workers were dead. Families were left devastated. The city was shaken to its core, and the public was outraged. Newspapers splashed the gruesome details across their front pages, reporting on the terrible conditions that had led to such an unimaginable loss of life. Citizens demanded justice, and Harris and Blank were brought to trial. Yet, despite overwhelming evidence of their negligence and the clear disregard for worker safety, the factory owners were acquitted of manslaughter. They did eventually pay small compensation settlements to the victims' families, but it was little comfort after such a massive loss. Still, the impact of the Triangle Fire could not be ignored. It became a powerful rallying cry for labor reform. Massive protests and demonstrations swept through New York, led by groups like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, which had long been fighting for better working conditions. Politicians, activists, and even wealthy socialites joined the push for reform, working together to pass new laws on fire safety, building codes, and labor protections. Things like mandatory fire drills, unlocked exit doors, better fire escapes, and sprinkler systems became standard requirements. It was a hard-earned and deeply painful turning point, a moment in history that changed the way the nation thought about worker rights and workplace safety. Even today, more than a century later, the memory of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire lingers. It stands as a sobering reminder of what can happen when profit is valued over people, when workers' voices are ignored, and when basic safety measures are neglected. The reforms that followed have saved countless lives since then, but the tragedy itself remains a heartbreaking chapter in the story of American labor, one that should never be forgotten. On June 2, 2022, what should have been just another workday turned into a nightmare beyond imagination. Stephen Dirk, a 39-year-old father of 3, had barely begun his new job at the Caterpillar Foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. It was only his 9th day, a day filled with hope for the future, a fresh start to provide for his family. But by the time the shift was over, Stephen was gone. Not just gone, erased. Stephen wasn't just another worker. He was a family man, deeply devoted to his partner, Jessica Sutter, and their 3 young daughters, aged 4, 5, and 12. Living in Peoria, Illinois, he had taken this job to secure a better future for them. But little did he know, the very place he sought opportunity would become the site of his unthinkable final moments. The Caterpillar Foundry was a behemoth of industry, melting up to 1,000 tons of iron daily, producing parts for heavy machinery. But behind its massive output was a lurking danger. A smelting facility running at 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit is no place for mistakes. One wrong move could mean instant death, and that's exactly what happened. It was just past 9:20 a.m. when Stephen was assigned a seemingly simple task: collect a sample of molten iron from the massive crucible, a vat containing liquid metal hot enough to melt a human body in seconds. There were no guardrails, no safety harness, no second chances. Then it happened. A misstep, a slip, a fraction of a second. Stephen fell, but he didn't fall completely. He landed partially inside the hellish cauldron. His lower body was instantly incinerated, while the rest of him remained, if only for a moment. In the blink of an eye, Stephen's existence was reduced to ash. Panic erupted through the facility. The Peoria County Coroner's Office and Sheriff's Department were called, but there was little left to recover. By 10:20 a.m., the entire foundry was evacuated. The iron inside the crucible cooled, and when the coroner's team returned hours later, they found only small bone fragments. The cause of death? Thermal annihilation. What's even more horrifying is that this tragedy was preventable. Following an investigation by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, it was determined that Caterpillar had failed to implement basic safety measures that could have saved Stephen's life. The fine? A mere $145,000. A slap on the wrist for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. To make matters worse, this wasn't the first death. Just 6 months earlier, another worker, Scott Adams, had also lost his life at the same facility. Employees had long voiced their concerns about the grueling conditions and unsafe practices, but their warnings went unheard. For Jessica Sutter, the pain was unbearable. She had lost the love of her life, and their daughters had lost their father, all because of negligence. She held Caterpillar directly responsible for his death, stating that the company showed no remorse, no accountability, and not a single offer of support to the family left behind. In the end, no criminal charges were filed, No justice was served, and for those who still walk the floors of the Caterpillar Foundry, the question lingers: how many more lives will be lost before something changes? On April 15, 1984, British comedy lost one of its most beloved and unforgettable stars, Tommy Cooper. Standing at an impressive 6 feet 4 inches and always sporting his iconic red fez, Tommy was a Welsh comedian and magician famous for turning magic tricks into comedy gold. His unique style, failing at magic so spectacularly that the failure itself became the joke. Audiences loved him because no matter how chaotic his act got, you always ended up in stitches. That night, Tommy was performing live at Her Majesty's Theatre in London on the hugely popular TV show Live from Her Majesty's. He'd been on countless shows like this over his long and successful career, and the audience couldn't wait for the laughter they knew was coming. The show kicked off, and Tommy took the stage for one of his classic routines involving a giant magic cloak, with his assistant helping him into the oversized garment and host Jimmy Tarbuck handing him increasingly ridiculous props from behind the curtain. The act was pure Tommy Cooper, silly, unpredictable, and side-splittingly funny. As the props got bigger and the laughs got louder, everything seemed perfectly in place for another unforgettable performance. But then, something no one expected happened. In the middle of the act, Tommy suddenly dropped to his knees. The audience, used to his physical comedy and over-the-top antics, roared with laughter, thinking it was just another brilliant part of the routine. But as the seconds ticked by and Tommy didn't get back up, the mood started to shift. Behind the curtain, Jimmy Tarbuck realized something was wrong. Tommy had slumped forward against the stage curtains, his body limp. At first, even the crew thought it might be part of the act. After all, this was Tommy Cooper, the master of comedic chaos. But the reality soon became clear. This was no joke. In a quick decision, the show's director cut to an unscheduled commercial break, a move that signaled the seriousness of the situation. Backstage, the crew rushed to Tommy's side, desperately trying to help him. His son, also backstage, confirmed their worst fears. Tommy had a bad back, and he'd never collapse like this unless something was terribly wrong. As medics tried to revive him, the show's producer, David Bell, faced an impossible choice. With millions of viewers watching live, should they cancel the broadcast or keep going? After a quick discussion, they decided the show must go on. The comedy duo Les Denny and Dustin G were sent out to perform. They squeezed their routine into the limited stage space while Tommy's unmoving body remained hidden just feet away behind the curtain. The audience, still unaware of the tragedy unfolding, kept laughing, not knowing that the man they'd come to see was fighting for his life. When Dennis and G finished their set, the curtain was carefully removed, and Tommy was quietly taken out of the theater on a stretcher. He was rushed to Westminster Hospital, but it was too late. Tommy Cooper was pronounced dead on arrival, the result of a massive heart attack. Though the official announcement of his death wouldn't come until the following day, word spread quickly. The world of comedy was in shock. In the days that followed, debates flared over the decision to continue the show after Tommy's collapse. Some felt it was disrespectful, believing the performance should have stopped the moment it became clear something was wrong. Others argued that continuing the show was exactly what Tommy would have wanted. After all, he'd dedicated his life to making people laugh, and in a bittersweet way, his final moments kept the laughter going. On March 11, 2011, Japan faced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its history, a massive earthquake followed by a powerful tsunami that triggered a nuclear crisis with far-reaching consequences. This event, known as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, dramatically changed how the world viewed nuclear power and safety. It all began with the Great East Japan earthquake, a staggering magnitude 9.0 quake, which struck off the northeastern coast of Honshu, Japan's main island. The earthquake alone caused significant damage, but the real devastation came moments later when a towering tsunami, with waves reaching heights of up to 15 meters, around 50 feet, swept over the coastline. This deadly combination overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, located near the coast in Fukushima Prefecture. Fukushima Daiichi was a complex of 6 boiling water reactors designed to provide electricity safely and efficiently. Under normal conditions, these reactors rely on constant cooling systems to prevent overheating of the nuclear fuel rods, which generate heat through nuclear fission. However, when the tsunami struck, it knocked out the plant's power supply, including critical backup diesel generators that powered the cooling systems. Without electricity to operate pumps and fans, the reactors began to overheat. This loss of cooling caused the fuel rods in 3 reactors to melt partially, a process known as a meltdown. As temperatures soared, hydrogen gas built up inside the reactor buildings, eventually leading to explosions that damaged the structures and released radioactive materials into the environment. The contamination spread through air, water, and soil, raising serious concerns about health and environmental safety. The Japanese government quickly ordered evacuations in a roughly 20-kilometer radius around the plant, relocating over 100,000 people to safer areas. The evacuation was a massive logistical challenge, separating families and uprooting communities. Many residents still face long-term displacement, as large areas remain contaminated and unsafe for habitation. Globally, the disaster sparked intense debate over nuclear power's risks and benefits. While nuclear energy offers a low-carbon alternative to fossil fuels, Fukushima exposed vulnerabilities in reactor design and emergency preparedness. Countries around the world reassessed their nuclear programs. Some, like Germany, accelerated plans to phase out nuclear power, while others invested heavily in safety upgrades and alternative energy sources. The cleanup and decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi is an ongoing, complex process expected to take decades. It involves removing highly radioactive fuel, managing contaminated water, and dismantling damaged reactors, all under challenging conditions. Advanced technologies, including remote-controlled robots and specialized containment systems, are being used to reduce risks to workers and the environment. Despite the severity of the disaster, Fukushima also led to improvements in nuclear safety regulations globally. Japan, for example, established the Nuclear Regulation Authority, NRA, a stricter oversight body tasked with enforcing enhanced safety standards. New protocols for natural disaster preparedness, emergency response, and public communication have been implemented. Fukushima's legacy is a sobering reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting it with robust safety measures. It highlights the delicate balance between harnessing nuclear energy's benefits and managing its risks responsibly. The disaster also accelerated interest and investment in renewable energy technologies like solar and wind power, seen as safer and more sustainable options. In conclusion, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster was a pivotal moment in modern history. It was born from a natural catastrophe but magnified by technological failures. Its impacts, social, environmental, and political, continue to influence energy policy and safety practices worldwide. The disaster underscores the need for vigilance, innovation, and a commitment to protecting both people and the planet as we move forward in the complex world of energy production. Natalia Nemitz never saw it coming. It was just another day at the Slavyanka confectionery factory in Stary Oskol, Russia. October 20th, 2017. A day like any other, until it wasn't. Natalia was 36 years old, a hardworking factory worker and a devoted mother to her 10-year-old son, Ivan. She lived in the Belgorod Oblast region, working long hours to provide for her child. Like many others, she relied on the factory for her livelihood, never questioning the risks that came with the job. The Slavyanka confectionery factory was a major employer in the area, producing sweets and other confectionery products. Inside, massive industrial machines stirred and melted ingredients at dangerously high temperatures. These machines were essential to production, but they were also deadly if proper safety measures weren't followed. That morning, Natalia was assigned to clean one of the large caramel mixers. It was routine work, something she had likely done many times before, but something went terribly wrong. No one saw exactly how it happened. Maybe she slipped on the factory's slick floors. Maybe the stifling heat and fumes in the air made her dizzy. Maybe she lost her balance for just a second. All that mattered was this: she fell into the boiling caramel. And then the mixer started. Thick, molten caramel engulfed her body almost instantly. The temperature was far beyond the boiling point of water. The pain would have been unimaginable. But Natalia never even had the chance to scream. The intense heat likely knocked her unconscious almost immediately. The machine's sharp industrial blades, designed to stir and smooth the caramel, began turning. By the time her coworkers realized she was missing, it was too late. They searched the factory floor, calling her name, but their search ended in horror when they spotted something sticking out of the caramel-filled vat: her legs. The rest of her had already been consumed by the boiling mixture. Panic spread through the factory, but there was nothing anyone could do. Natalia Nemitz, a mother, a worker, and a fighter, was gone in the most unimaginable way possible. And yet, the nightmare didn't end there. The factory's management tried to cover it up. They warned the workers to stay silent. Anyone who spoke would be fired. There were no official reports, no public acknowledgement. They wanted the accident erased as if it had never happened. But the truth has a way of forcing itself into the light. A local newspaper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, uncovered the horrifying details. Investigators soon arrived and found serious safety violations at the factory. Workers had not been given proper training. Safety protocols had been ignored. Even worse, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the third worker death at the factory in just 1 year. Natalia's death wasn't just an accident. It was preventable. She had walked into work that morning expecting to go home to her son at the end of her shift. But because of negligence, she never got that chance. Her son, Ivan, was left without a mother. He was taken in by his aunt, forced to start over in a world that had just stolen the most important person in his life. There was no justice for Natalia. No undoing what had happened, just a lesson. A brutal, gut-wrenching lesson about the cost of cutting corners, about the lives shattered by negligence, about a mother who walked into work one morning and never walked out. It was January 20th, 2021, a bitterly cold day in the Scottish borders. The wind cut across the open land, making the already demanding job of working outdoors even more grueling. But for Robert MacArthur, it was just another day on the job. At 32 years old, Robert was a seasoned, charged-hand linesman with 13 years of experience in the industry. He was respected by his colleagues, known for his reliability, dedication, and no-nonsense approach to work. Outside of his job, he was a passionate football fan, a die-hard Rangers supporter, and a man who took pride in providing for himself and his loved ones. He had operated heavy machinery countless times before, and on this day, he was tasked. Leslie Cameron Harvey's life was a mix of incredible talent, rock and roll dreams, and heartbreaking tragedy. Born on September 13, 1944, in Glasgow, Scotland, Leslie seemed destined for music. With his older brother Alex Harvey already making waves as a musician, Leslie's path to rock stardom felt inevitable. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was in his blood. And let's be honest, when your big brother's in a band, how could you not want to grab a guitar and join in? Leslie's guitar skills were no joke. The guy was so good that The Animals, a massively popular band at the time, wanted him to join their lineup. But Leslie stayed loyal to his brother's band, the Alex Harvey Soul Band. He later joined the Blues Council, another Scottish band making moves in the music scene. Sadly, in 1965, tragedy struck when the band's tour van crashed, claiming the lives of 2 members and leading to the group's breakup. But Leslie didn't let that stop him. By 1969, he joined Cartoone, a band that opened for legends like Led Zeppelin and Spirit on their U.S. tour. Imagine playing your guitar while Led Zeppelin waits in the wings. Talk about pressure. Leslie even played on a solo album by Maurice Gibb of the Bee Gees, though most of that music never saw the light of day. Later that same year, Leslie co-founded the band Stone the Crows, and things really started to take off. Managed by Peter Grant, the same powerhouse manager behind Led Zeppelin, the band quickly gained a following. And Leslie's guitar playing, it was electric, pun intended. His unique sound and skill became a signature part of the band's identity. But on May 3, 1972, everything changed. Leslie was performing with Stone the Crows at the top-ranked suite in Swansea, Wales, when a freak accident happened. Mid-performance, he reached for a microphone that hadn't been properly grounded, and with his guitar still in hand, he unknowingly completed a fatal electrical circuit. In an instant, a surge of electricity passed through his body. Despite the crew's desperate attempts to save him and the swift arrival of an ambulance, Leslie was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. He was only 27. The music world was rocked by his sudden death. Leslie's incredible talent and promise were gone far too soon. But his tragic accident wasn't just a moment of mourning. It became a wake-up call. The music industry started taking electrical safety much more seriously, leading to stricter venue safety measures and better equipment standards. For Leslie's family and bandmates, the loss was devastating. His brother Alex kept making music, but the weight of that grief was heavy. And Stone the Crows? They tried to keep going, but without Leslie's magic on the guitar, it just wasn't the same. Eventually, the band disbanded, their sound forever missing the heart and soul Leslie brought to it. Leslie Harvey's story is one of raw talent, loyalty, and tragic loss, but his legacy lives on, not just in the music he made, but in the safety measures that protect performers today. On December 6, 1917, Halifax, Nova Scotia, was a busy and crucial port city during World War I. Ships carrying troops, supplies, and dangerous cargo arrived and departed constantly. Among these vessels was the French ship SS Mont Blanc, which was loaded with a massive and highly explosive cargo, including TNT, picric acid, benzol, and gun cotton. This made the ship a floating bomb in the harbor, a fact known only to a handful of people at the time. At the same moment, the Norwegian relief ship SS Imo was trying to leave the port, carrying supplies for Belgium. Due to a series of miscommunications, navigational errors, and some strict maritime rules, the two ships ended up on a collision course in the Narrows, the narrowest and most dangerous part of Halifax Harbor. The collision itself did not cause much damage initially, but it ruptured barrels of benzol, a highly flammable liquid, on the Mont Blanc's deck. This quickly ignited a fire on the ship's cargo hold. The crew aboard the Mont Blanc realized the extreme danger of their situation immediately and abandoned ship. They rowed away as fast as they could, leaving the burning ship drifting toward the shore. Unfortunately, the people in Halifax had no idea what the Mont Blanc was carrying. When the fire started, many curious residents, workers, and dock hands gathered near the waterfront or stood at their windows to watch the burning ship. They saw the thick black smoke and the flames licking higher and higher, but no one understood that this was a ticking time bomb heading straight toward the city. Then, at 9:04 a.m., about 20 minutes after the collision, the Mont Blanc exploded. The blast was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, releasing the energy equivalent of nearly 3,000 tons of TNT. The shockwave tore through the city, destroying buildings, shattering windows miles away, and hurling debris like deadly missiles into the air. The force was so powerful it created a tsunami in the harbor, washing away docks, boats, and anything else in its path along the waterfront. The human toll was devastating. Over 2,000 people lost their lives, and around 9,000 more were seriously injured. The blast caused horrific injuries. Burns, broken bones, and blindness were common. Many victims were people who had been standing at their windows or near the harbor watching the fire, completely unaware of the danger they were in. The explosion leveled entire neighborhoods, leaving thousands homeless just days before Christmas. As if the explosion and destruction weren't enough, the very next day, Halifax was hit by a severe blizzard. The sudden snowstorm buried the devastated city under a thick blanket of snow and ice, making rescue efforts even more challenging. Medical staff and volunteers worked around the clock to care for the injured, despite freezing temperatures and limited supplies. Emergency hospitals overflowed with patients, many of whom had suffered serious injuries. Families frantically searched the rubble for missing loved ones while battling the cold and snow. The blizzard added another layer of hardship to an already unimaginable tragedy. Despite the destruction, loss, and heartbreak, the people of Halifax showed remarkable resilience and determination. The community came together to support one another, and aid arrived quickly from across Canada and from Boston in the United States, which sent supplies, medical help, and funds to assist the recovery. Volunteers, workers, and soldiers joined forces to clear debris, rebuild homes, and restore essential services. The city's recovery was slow and difficult, but it demonstrated the strength and spirit of the people who refused to be defeated by disaster. On July 6, 1988, the Piper Alpha oil platform, located about 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen in the North Sea, was operating as one of the world's most productive offshore. It was early September 2019, and Samuela Kiravakayawa was chasing a new beginning. A former schoolteacher from Fiji, he had left behind a complicated past to start over in Australia. He was 40 years old, eager to build a better life, and determined to make the most of his fresh start. He had buried his father earlier that year. His marriage had fallen apart, but despite it all, he remained hopeful. He had found work with A1 Arbor Tree Services, a tree management company in Sydney. He shared photos of himself in front of the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, proof that he was embracing his new home. His friends and family back in Fiji saw a man smiling through the struggles, a man refusing to let life break him. But fate had other plans. The morning of September 7th, 2019 started like any other. It was a Saturday. Samuela was on a job at Cromer School in Linfield, Sydney, alongside two co-workers. His task was to feed branches into a wood chipper, a machine with a simple purpose but an unforgiving nature. He should not have been doing it by hand. The wood chipper's design specifications clearly stated that a mechanical log loader should be used. The machine itself bore a glaring warning: danger. Do not hand feed this machine. Severe injury or death can result. But those warnings were ignored. At some point, his co-workers stepped away to move a car. Samuela was left alone. He continued feeding the branches, unaware that every second brought him closer to disaster. Then, the unimaginable happened. In an instant, Samuela was pulled in. The monstrous machine did not hesitate, did not stop. His body disappeared into the in-feed hopper, dragged towards the roaring internal disc drum. There was no time to scream, no time to react. By the time his co-workers returned, it was already too late. Samuela was gone. Blood was splattered across the machine, a gruesome and undeniable sign of what had taken place. A sickening realization set in. They called the authorities, their hands shaking as they dialed, their voices barely able to form the words. Safe work. New South Wales launched an immediate investigation. What they found was infuriating. A one arbor tree. Services had ignored safety protocols. The wood chipper was not meant to be fed by hand. It had clear warnings against it. The company had failed to conduct a proper risk assessment, failed to ensure its equipment was being used safely, failed to provide adequate training. Worse still, the machine was already faulty before that morning, and yet they let him use it. The court found the company's negligence undeniable. The harm was entirely foreseeable, and the steps to prevent it had been simple, and yet they did nothing. At first, A1 Arbor Tree Services was fined $3 million. A guilty plea reduced the fine to $2.25 million, but no amount of money could bring back Samuela. Sophie Kotsis, New South Wales's Work, Health and Safety Minister, called it what it was, an avoidable tragedy. She reminded employers that workers should not have to fear for their lives just to earn a living, that safety laws exist for a reason, that one moment of carelessness, one ignored warning, can be the difference between life and death. Samuela's friends and family were left to mourn a man who had endured so much, only to have his life stolen from him in the cruelest way. He had been humble, hardworking, and always ready to make others laugh, and now he was gone. A man who had traveled thousands of miles for a second chance at life had instead met his death in a machine that never should have been running the way it was, all because someone chose to cut corners. On June 29, 2013, the lights were bright, the crowd was buzzing, and Cirque du Soleil's K.A. was in full swing at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The audience was hooked, the stunts were jaw-dropping, and the choreography was pure magic. Among the stars of the show was Sarah Guillard-Guillot, a 31-year-old acrobat and aerialist with over 2 decades of experience. Sarah wasn't just a performer, she was a mentor, a teacher, and a beloved part of the Cirque family. Originally from Paris, she had been with Kay since 2006 and was known for her dedication and kindness. Offstage, she taught young performers and inspired those around her with her passion and skill. As the show reached its climactic final scene, the performers prepared for a daring battle on a vertical stage, a sequence requiring precision, strength, and total trust in their safety equipment. Sarah was lifted into the air, ready for her part in the act, but then something went horribly wrong. The wire rope holding her suddenly snapped, and she fell nearly 100 feet into a pit below the stage, out of the audience's view. At first, many thought the fall was part of the performance. Cirque du Soleil is known for its dramatic stunts, but the sound of Sarah's screams and the shocked reactions of her fellow performers quickly made it clear that this was no act. The show was immediately stopped, and an announcement was made that the performance had been canceled. Audience members were offered refunds or vouchers, but the mood had shifted from excitement to heartbreak. Sarah was rushed to the hospital, but tragically she was pronounced dead at 11:43 p.m. It was the first onstage fatality in Cirque du Soleil's 30-year history, a devastating milestone that shook the entire entertainment community. In the days following the accident, Cirque du Soleil's founder, Guy Laliberté, expressed deep sorrow, calling Sarah's death an unimaginable loss. He praised her extraordinary talent and dedication, and the company suspended K.A. immediately as investigations began. The Nevada Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, was called in to determine what had caused the accident, and their findings were both heartbreaking and alarming. The investigation revealed a combination of insufficient training and faulty safety equipment. The wire rope that was supposed to keep Sarah safe snapped because it slipped out of a pulley and scraped against a sharp edge. The speed of her ascent caused the rope to wear down and break, a tragic mechanical failure. OSHA cited multiple safety violations and issued more than $25,000 in fines to Cirque du Soleil. The MGM Grand, where the show took place, was also fined $7,000 for exposing its employees to hazardous working conditions. Sarah's death sent shockwaves through the Cirque du Soleil family and the broader performing arts community. Colleagues, students, and fans mourned her loss, sharing memories and tributes on social media. As a mother of 2 young children and a dedicated teacher at CirqueFit, a Las Vegas-based circus and fitness program, Sarah had touched countless lives. Her students and their families spoke of her kindness, patience, and unwavering support. In response to the tragedy, Cirque du Soleil undertook a comprehensive review of its safety protocols. The company committed to improving equipment maintenance, enhancing performer training, and ensuring the highest safety standards. K.A. resumed performances on July 16, 2013, with the first show dedicated to Sarah's memory, a powerful tribute to a remarkable performer. Sarah's accident drew attention to the broader safety issues in high-risk live performances. While her death was the most severe in Cirque du Soleil's history, it wasn't the first. In 2007, 2 performers were seriously injured during a performance of Zumanity, and in 2009, an acrobat died during a training session in Montreal. These incidents highlighted the dangers of pushing the boundaries of live entertainment and the importance of prioritizing safety. On July 6, 1988, the Piper Alpha oil platform, located about 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen in the North Sea, was operating as one of the world's most productive offshore oil rigs. Designed to withstand harsh conditions, it was a massive structure extracting oil and gas beneath the ocean floor, a technological marvel and a source of livelihoods for hundreds of workers. But on that fateful summer day, everything changed in a devastating matter of minutes. The disaster began with routine maintenance on a gas compressor pump. Earlier, the pump had been taken offline for repairs, and a critical safety valve was removed for maintenance. Unfortunately, the system's communication broke down. Those restarting the pump were unaware that the safety valve had not been replaced. This error allowed highly flammable gas to leak unchecked into the platform. When the pump was turned back on, the leaking gas found an ignition source, causing a massive explosion. This initial blast was only the beginning. The explosion damaged the rig's safety systems, including the firewalls and emergency shutdown procedures, and it ruptured gas lines that led to further blasts. Fires quickly spread across the platform, fueled by oil and gas, reaching temperatures that melted steel beams and destroyed escape routes. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Emergency systems failed to control the fire or assist evacuation effectively. Crew members faced terrifying conditions as smoke and flames engulfed the rig. Rescue efforts were hindered by the severity of the blaze and the remote location. Helicopters and lifeboats tried to save as many as they could, but in the end, 167 men lost their lives out of the 226 on board. It remains the deadliest offshore oil disaster in history. In the wake of the tragedy, a public inquiry was established, led by Lord Cullen. The Cullen inquiry revealed that the disaster was not simply an accident, but the result of a series of human errors, procedural failures, and inadequate safety culture. A critical failure in communication meant the maintenance team's warnings were not properly conveyed to operations personnel. Key safety equipment was missing or not functioning as intended. Emergency procedures were unclear, and personnel were insufficiently trained for such a catastrophic event. One of the most important findings was that safety had not been fully integrated into every level of the rig's operation. The inquiry highlighted how complex offshore environments require clear communication, rigorous maintenance practices, and comprehensive emergency preparedness. Piper Alpha showed that technical advances alone are not enough to prevent disaster. Safety depends on people, processes, and culture working flawlessly together. The aftermath of Piper Alpha led to significant reforms in offshore safety regulations around the world. The oil industry adopted stricter standards for equipment testing, maintenance, and emergency response. Safety management systems became mandatory, designed to identify risks proactively and ensure everyone knows their roles in a crisis. The tragedy served as a painful but necessary wake-up call that saved countless lives in the years since. Piper Alpha remains a solemn reminder of the dangers inherent in extracting natural resources from challenging environments. While the platform was destroyed and hundreds of lives lost, the lessons learned have transformed offshore safety. The disaster taught the industry that neglecting communication and safety procedures can have catastrophic consequences. October 23, 2023, just another workday in downtown Boston. The city was alive with its usual rush, people heading to work, taxis weaving through traffic, and businesses opening their doors. High above the busy streets, Nicholas J. Marks, a 40-year-old window cleaner, prepared for another day on the job. He had been doing this for over 20 years, scaling some of the tallest buildings in the city. His job was dangerous, but Nicholas was an expert. He was careful, methodical, and respected by his colleagues. He knew the risks better than anyone. But on that day, something went terribly wrong. Nicholas was working on the 32-story office building at 100 Summer Street. As he prepared to lower himself into his bosun's chair, the safety anchor line, his lifeline, suddenly snapped. In an instant, the thing that was supposed to keep him secure failed. Nicholas fell. He plummeted toward the street below, hitting a parapet wall with such force that it left visible damage. Witnesses on the ground could do nothing but watch in shock. Some screamed. Others called 911, their hands shaking as they struggled to process what had just happened. Police and emergency responders arrived quickly. Officers roped off the area with yellow tape, while detectives took photographs of the scene. A single shoe, a shattered piece of plastic, and the broken bosun's chair were all that remained of Nicholas's final moments. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was something that never should have happened. An investigation by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, revealed chilling details. Nicholas's employer, Sky Safety Incorporated, had failed him. The company had not properly inspected the safety equipment. It had allowed workers to use lifelines that were already worn and defective. It had not trained them to spot these dangers before they stepped over the edge. OSHA fined the company
$447,000.
SOC, swing citing repeated and willful violations of safety regulations. Inspectors concluded that Nicholas's death could have been prevented if the company had followed proper safety procedures, but Sky Safety denied responsibility. They insisted that they had spent money on new safety equipment and that Nicholas had been properly trained. They claimed that an unseen piece of metal had severed the rope, an unexpected hazard they had no way of preventing. But OSHA found no evidence to support that claim. Nicholas's death left behind a grieving family, including 2 young children who would never see their father again. His co-workers, many of whom had looked up to him for guidance, were left questioning their own safety. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was a warning, a reminder that when companies cut corners on safety, people die, and no worker should ever have to wonder if today will be their last.